Welcome to our Mitzvah of the Week discussion for Parshat Mishpatim. And I'm going to share the source sheet. I put this sort of as an addendum, but this week we are rich with mitzvot to choose from. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to scroll all the way to the bottom for 1 second here. Oops. Um, So here, okay, so this is what I did. I counted all the mitzvot. I didn't count. The Rambam counted and the Sefer HaChinuch counted. Interestingly, their counting is very similar, but also a little bit different. Um, the Rambam side happens to have the citation of the pasuk from which he draws the mitzvah. The Sefer HaChinuch side does not, just because of the way that Sefaria organizes these two sources. Um, so they both go in order of the Parsha, but they sort of have some differences. It's hard because they also, the Rambam side I took from the Chabad website, and so the English translation is a little different. So, for example, mitzvah 5, 11, and 43 are the same. They're just described a little bit differently in English. So there are many, many mitzvot. If you scroll down, you will see that the Sefer Chinuch has more. But if we just sort of look through a little bit, there are a lot of mitzvot about how to treat Jewish servants and slaves, and non-Jewish servants and slaves. Um, and then there are a lot of commandments, interestingly, not to strike or curse your parents. And then there are a lot of mitzvot about the courts. What should the court do in any situation? Um, about damages, about dangerous animals, oxes that have damaged once or more than once, punitive measures against a thief, damages in fire, right? A lot. It's a very technical parsha in a lot of ways. Um, the case of a seducer, of a borrower, of a sorcerer. And then these two mitzvot, which are in the middle here, about not cheating a convert monetarily and not harming a convert with words. Interestingly, the Rambam and the Sefer Chinuch switch the order of those two, but we'll look at that more closely. Those are the mitzvot we're going to focus on. And then mitzvot against oppressing the weak, the poor, the destitute, the orphan, the widow, um, not forcing someone to pay when they can't afford to, not charging interest, not cursing or blaspheming um, anybody. Some laws about produce and Shemitah years, not following the majority, not, helping someone whose donkey has fallen over. Um, Not accepting bribes. There are so many places we could have gone here, um, that have, I think, a lot of sort of modern contemporary application. Right, to celebrate the Shalosh Regalim, to rest on Shabbat, to release lands in the Shemitah year, um, not to do avodah zarah, not to cook meat and milk together, laws of the Korban Pesach. And then, as you can see, there are two extra mitzvot on the Sefer HaChinuch side, compared to the Rambam. But this is obviously Mishpatim, right? Is a series of laws, this whole parsha, and so there were many choices. So I decided, now we're going to scroll all the way back up here, to look at these two mitzvot that come from this one pasuk. So the pasuk is Viger lo toneh velo tilchatzenu ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. So the two mitzvot, right, that we saw the Rambam and the Sefer Chinuch have are the mitzvah of lo toneh and lo tilchatzenu. Here translated as not wronging or oppressing the stranger, right? And interestingly, you could think that that was sort of one mitzvah with two different sub headings, but both the Rambam and the Sefer Chinuch agree these are going to be two separate mitzvot. And we even have a reason, right? Because we were strangers in the land of Egypt. This felt to me like just sort of a contemporary issue in sort of the modern world. Um, the idea of converts of Gerim, I think, is a really charged and interesting topic. I think I taught Shavuos about it, maybe. Um, I wrote my smicha dissertation on conversion and how we treat converts, and so I couldn't resist looking at this mitzvah here. Okay, so what does it mean, lo toneh and lo tilchatzenu? So Rashi helps us get a start, and Rashi says onaat devarim. Lo toneh means not to vex someone with words. And we'll see examples of what that would look like to vex a stranger with words. And what is lo tilchatzenu begezelat mamon? That means financially. So Rashi is saying this breaks down on two levels, and we'll follow this all the way through. Hello, Sherry, welcome back. I was worried when I lost you there. We're looking at this pasuk about lo toneh and lo tilchatzenu for gerim, for converts, right? So Rashi says lo toneh is a sort of a verbal oppression, and lo tilchatzenu is a financial oppression. Um, and if we look at the Gemara in Baba Metzia, we will see some examples of how this plays out. And here, I will say, here's like a tricky thing is we could easily have done this mitzvah of lo toneh in general later on in Vayikra and Sefer Vayikra, where there is a more general, not oppressing people with words statement. And so some of this is going to overlap. Some of it will have to do with converts, and some of it is a more general idea of what does it mean to be lo toneh. Okay, so here the Mishnah says, "Kashem she'ona'a b'mikach umimkar, kach ona'a b'dvarim." So the Gemara is saying, just like you could imagine exploiting someone in a financial sense, there is also a verbal mistreatment, right? Ona'a of statements. And so now the Mishnah is going to give us examples, right? I think maybe to the rabbis of the Mishnah, it was clear what it meant to cheat someone financially, but it felt a little confusing what it meant to cheat someone with your words. And I think these examples are really interesting. Lo yomar lo bekama chefet zeh v'hu eno rotze likach. This one I feel like is often like a morality teaching for students, right? Don't ask a seller in the marketplace how much something is if you don't wish to purchase it. Right? Don't walk into a store and bother the salesman and ask a lot of questions and take up a lot of time if you have no intention of buying the item. Right? Yeah, please, Melissa.
I just have a quick question about this one.
Sure.
What did you say the mitzvah was listed as or called in short language?
Lo toneh,
So don't steal or don't no kona is buy, don't acquire.
not koneh. So lo here it's with a tough lo toneh,
Oh, okay.
and it's translated here as do not wrong, but it's a little bit unclear of what the wrongdoing is here.
No, I had a teacher once who was talking about theft and stealing and how many people say that's not me on Yom Kippur, but she was
Hmm.
explaining all the different ways the Talmud goes into what theft and stealing is, including stealing a person's time. For example, if you're like making so much noise, but it's their sleeping time and you're waking them up, you're stealing their sleep because of the way that you're behaving in the house. Or in this, she gave this example of you're in a store, it's kind of handy because they're educated to ask them questions about the product, but you have no intention of buying there. So I never knew where it came from, but thank you.
Yeah. So the broader principle will come from Vayikra, from Parsha Bahar. It's the same mitzvah, though. Right here, it's very specific to the ger, to the convert. But yes, ona'ah, exploitation, as it's translated here, right? This word ona'ah, exploitation, um, is explored in many ways. And so I think it's a beautiful point your teacher was making, right? Which is that we assume that exploitation is financial. But even if it's not financial, meaning it's not that you're not buying it and so you're exploiting them because you're not buying it. Everyone's entitled not to buy something in a store. It's that like you've gotten the seller's hopes up, right? You've raised
You're
their
intending not to buy it, but you didn't act that way.
right. Right. But I'm saying the exploitation is not buying the item, but it's the way you talk about it with the saleskeeper,
That's
right?
what I read about intention. Like
Yeah.
you're acting as if you're somebody who is a buyer.
Yes. Yes, 100%. Like when sometimes my kids and I will window shop and when we go in we say, "Oh, we're just looking," right? We
Yes.
want to be very clear about like what we're planning to do or not do. Don't waste time on us is what I'm trying to say, right? So that is the first and classic case of ona'at dvarim here. What's another example? And this is the one, this is sorry, this is not the one, this is the one before. Im haya ba'al tshuva. What if this is someone who used to do things that were not according to Torah or halacha, but has since done teshuva? Lo yomar lo zechor ma'asecha harishonim, right? Don't say to him, do you remember what you used to do? Right? If you had a friend in college who was wild and crazy, went out drinking all the time, didn't learn Torah, didn't slept through davening, and then you meet him later in life when he's settled and has a family, don't say, "Oh, remember those days where you blew off mincha?" Um, that's a tame example, perhaps, right? The Gemara interestingly tells a story of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who is uh, Baal Tshuva, who used to be a robber, and it really goes into detail about how pained he is when someone reminds him, "Oh, let's just ask our resident thief, right? Who used to be a thief. He'll remember the details of what it's like to be a robber." So this can be quite a serious one, right? Not to remind people of past transgressions. Here is the one from our Parsha, Im hu ben gerim. If this is a child of converts, right? Not even the convert himself. Lo yomar lo zechor ma'aseh avotecha. Don't say, do you remember what your parents used to do? Shne'emar v'ger lo toneh v'lo tilchatenu, right? And that quotes our pasuk. Now, I think we could have gone one step further. We could have said, sort of similar to the Baal Tshuva, you don't say to the convert, "Hey, remember when you used to love lobster before you kept kosher?" Right? Or remember when you used to go to church and take communion, and that's like such a avodah zarah, right? It doesn't only have to be what the children of the converts do, but we don't afflict converts by reminding them of their pasts, which are not in line with their current present. So the Gemara goes into a little bit more detail of the kinds of things that you might want not want to say. And I think, as Melissa's teacher said, like it's helpful to think because I think often we think, "Oh, I'm not low tone. I don't like call people mean names, right? I don't say sort of harsh things, but some of these are actually, I think, things that sometimes accidentally come up in conversation, right? Not to say Zachor ma'asecha rishonim, not to say Zachor ma'asecha avotecha. Here is the new sort of one that has to do with our parsha. Im haya ger uba lilmod Torah, right? Someone who is converted and wants to come study Torah. Al yomar lo pesha achal nevelot utrefot shekatim urimashim ba lilmod Torah shenamra mipi hagvura, right? You should not taunt the person who comes to say Torah and to says that mouth that ate those unkosher animals, right? Those repugnant creatures, those creeping animals, that mouth has come to say Torah, right? Because if we believe in tshuva, or we believe in the power of the ability to convert, this is just tormenting. It's just afflicting the person. And I think
Can
sometimes,
I
yeah,
make
please, Tamar.
yes. I notice here I see that over and over again they use the word ger to mean convert. And
Yes.
that's how I always understand it. And yet I hear arguments in certain places in the Torah when they're saying when the word ger is used that the argument is they don't mean converts, they mean stranger.
Mm.
Have you ever
That is a great point. Hold on, let's pull it back up to this Rashi, right? Because the Rashi explains this, right? He says, "Kol hashon ger adam shelo nolad ba'ota medina," a stranger, right? A person not born in that land. Ela ba medina acheret lagur sham. So Rashi is explaining the way Tamar is, that it's not a convert, but it's rather a foreigner, an expat from somewhere else, right? Someone who doesn't know your ways, who isn't doing things in the right way, right? And I'm sure we can all think of a mistake that a friend has made if they come from another country. Maybe as simple as using an idiom incorrectly in English, right? And you're like, "Oh, you don't have that idiom in your country," right? It's so easy to be afflicting. So you're 100% right. The classical sort of commentaries understand this to be a stranger. But by the time of the Gemara, ger firmly means convert. Which is interesting, right? And Rashi comes after the Gemara. So in the space of the Gemara, it seems that they are understanding our pasuk to refer to converts. But certainly you're right that Rashi and some of the other medieval commentaries didn't understand it as converts, but as strangers. I think either way, the the broader meaning is sort of the same, I think, if you agree, right? Someone who hasn't grown up in these ways or whose practice has not been consistent, whether it's because they're a foreigner or because they're a convert, that we should be careful not to oppress them. And the two sort of ways that that bubbles up are in those two examples of someone traveling from another country or someone who has converted. But I think the idea is someone whose practice has been different and is now more similarly aligned to yours. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Okay. Um,
Can I have ask a question?
yeah, please.
A lot of these rules derive from the principle don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself, or
Hmm.
love your brother like yourself. Uh, so is that a mitzvah? Love your neighbor like you love yourself, or don't do to your neighbor, or do to your neighbor what you want your neighbor to do to yourself?
Hmm.
Wh-
I will have to look for that one. We'll have to see. I think it is a mitzvah, but we'll have to find it. Oh, maybe Rabbi Eliakim knows.
Yeah, it's in Parshas Kedoshim.
Okay, so we are going to get there, and maybe we will pledge Bli Neder to look at that mitzvah in Kedoshim. Thank you, Rabbi Eliakim. It's interesting though, Nelson, because sometimes I feel like, especially with kids, kids can be so mean to each other, and they say, "Well, I wouldn't mind. I don't care," right? Like, why can't they just laugh, right? Why couldn't you hear this as good-natured fun? Oh, does the mouth who ate lobster really want to come learn Torah? Right? I wouldn't care if someone said that to me. So it's interesting. Like, I think on some level, this is treat others the way you want to be treated. And on some level, it's like, even if you're willing to have a sort of harsh sense of humor, not everyone is, right?
Yeah,
Like, were you saying you feel like this could be folded under the love yourself, you love your neighbor as yourself?
yeah. You should also be able to laugh at yourself if you're so insecure that you cannot admit that you were wrong sometimes, then
Hmm.
something to deal with.
Yeah, I think these two mitzvot are sort of tied up in each other. I would agree with that. Because I think even someone who says, "Oh, why couldn't you accept this good-natured teasing," would probably not like it if someone did the same to them. And so the mitzvah of loving a neighbor like yourself would still apply here. And I think you're right that there has to be some space, right? I think the story of Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua is a very good one. I'm sorry I didn't put it on the source sheet because they're colleagues, right? And so maybe Rabbi Yoshua thought, well, I could just say, oh, maybe Rabban Gamliel will know because he was a thief in a past lifetime. And Rabban Gamliel says, no, actually, I don't like to talk about that. That really hurt my feelings, right? Um, and so sometimes we think that people are okay with things that they're not. Some people are more right? Some people are more open about their past than others. Some people are more willing to sort of admit that they're a stranger in a strange land. And so I guess maybe like the principle is if we don't know, we should just be extra careful, right? Low toned. Don't say anything that might cause an affliction.
You can
Um,
also in a positive way. We could say, well, you came a long way, baby. Look what you used to do and now you do now. Like you made tshuva, you grew up, you kol hakavod. Could be something like that.
Yes, yes, I have struggled with that one before, Nelson. With a friend who in college was so different. And I think I sort of like I felt like I was marveling, like, wow, look how beautiful it is. Like, who would have thought you would be someone who wanted to learn Torah all day in college? But it really did offend my friend, and I felt terribly about it afterwards. Because I think everyone's threshold for those things is different. And maybe at different times or different places in your life, it's different even from yourself. But there is, I feel like I've said this before here. I heard once that the Chafetz Chaim would say Baruch Hashem when you asked how he was doing, because there was like no words that were safe if you said, "Oh, well, I'm good," and they asked why, you might come to say lashon hara about someone or brag about yourself. Or if you said, "I'm not very good," and they say why, right, you might come to say lashon hara about someone. And it's like, are we really going to censor ourselves to the point where all we can say is Baruch Hashem, right? Like feels kind of ridiculous on some level. And yet, I think finding the balance in like a dignified, civilized society is hard. Yeah, Melissa.
Yeah.
Did we used to say that before he did that, or is he the one that popularized it and then we followed him?
I think saying it in answer to a question might have been popularized by him. I think there are some cases in the Gemara of people answering questions sort of like in that way. So I don't think it was like original, but at the same time, I think that is why some communities do answer, "How are you?" that way.
Did you just say the reason that he gave for answering that way is so that he wouldn't go into mistakenly stumble into the language that might go negative, whatever the topic might have been?
Yes, and even if it was a positive response, like then he might come to brag about himself or about someone else or make someone feel bad by his accomplishments, right? He was the person
That's
who told
very
me this was
helpful. I
what?
kind when I always try to add something, like I'll say thank God, and then I'll put the real answer, like I'm doing well or I'm doing okay or whatever. When
Hmm.
people don't ever give the actual words of what is the thing, if they feel well, they don't feel well, whatever it is.
Hmm.
I find it's so traditional and it happens to me every day, but I find it a little confusing and odd. And so I'm happy to hear the explanation.
I will say I have heard that. So I've never like seen it in writing. It's like so I could be wrong, but that's what I've heard. And the person who shared it with me was saying, "Isn't that such a wonderful thing?" It's not how I really came to understand it because I also think there's a value in sharing with people about your life, about what's going on. And so that answer, I think, sometimes becomes a front for like everything has to be fine.
It
And that's
does.
a
That's
little
why I
bit
always add the
dangerous.
phrase after saying it. Say thank
Yeah.
God, and I'll add a word or two
Hmm.
about how it is.
Yeah, and I think right, gratitude is a great way to start a sentence, right? Thank God for all the beautiful things I have, but to cut it off there is, but I think part of what I'm sure the Chafetz Chaim was struggling with, and what I think the rabbis are struggling with here, is that is these words in the non-bold. So just a reminder, it's not an exact translation, but that verbal. This is like the explanation of Rashi usually, or some other commentary. Verbal mistreatment is not typically obvious, right? Like as I think we've been sort of dancing around here, right? With Nelson's comment, with your comment, with my comment, right? Is like sometimes we think we mean something in one way, and especially now with text and email and all those things, right? I think often we misunderstand each other. And so it's sometimes difficult to ascertain the intent of the offender, right? Was he meaning a very well-intentioned, loving, like, look how far you've come? Or was he really trying to remind someone for the upteenth time when they're trying to sort of pretend that it's not true, that they didn't always grow up in this way, right? And as it says here, let's find this in the Hebrew. Um, um, Okay, Shahare Hadavar Masur Lalev, because the matter is given to the heart of each individual, right? And so it feels hard to say what hurts someone's heart doesn't hurt someone else's heart. V'chol davar hamasur lalev ne'amar bo vayareta me'elohecha. Right, so here we are straying into Parshat Bahar, right? And this is why when we talk about onaat dvarim, right, verbal mistreatment, that we say you have to fear Hashem because only Hashem knows what is, the intention of your heart. And Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Gadol ona'at varim ona'at mamon. It's actually worse to be verbally mistreating of someone than to exploit them monetarily. And that's why it says "Ve'areta me'elokecha," v'zeh lo na'amar "Ve'areta me'elokecha," right? So the ona'at varim it says, "And you shall fear Hashem," but the ona'at mamon it does not say that extra clause. Um, Right, because verbal affliction is ze bagufo, right? It like really it hits you in your body. Monetary exploitation vize b'mamono. This just affects their bank statement, right? Their budget line. Um, and so I think that this is important, right? That it's also with financial exploitation, you can return the money, right? Or you can give the money. I think once the words are sort of out of your mouth, it's very difficult to take them back, to remove the hurt that is caused by one's words. And because we're not always sure, right? We know no one wants to be cheated out of money, but it's sometimes hard to know how your comment will land when it's a verbal statement. So I think that, right, this idea that we have to be even more careful with verbal mistreatment is really important. If we think about the way we treat cleaning help in the shul, in our houses, right, babysitters, sort of like that the helping class that supports us, sometimes we say, well, we pay them their paycheck, right? So maybe I wasn't nice, maybe I didn't communicate clearly, maybe I didn't like speak respectfully, right? But I still gave them their paycheck. And I think it's so important to remember that the verbal mistreatment is maybe even more important than monetary exploitation. You can't just write a check and think that you can say whatever you want. Um,
On this subject,
yeah.
I'm thinking that there's a concept we use today called passive aggressive.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
to me, passive aggressive is me personally, passive aggressive is a worse sin than outright direct and obvious mistreatment.
Hmm. Why is that for you? Tell us more.
Pardon?
Why
Why?
why do you feel that way?
Because in addition to deliberately hurting the other person, you protect yourself by pretending that they're not understanding, by pretending that what you're saying is really a compliment. There's dishonesty and cheating on top of the hurtful effect of the words by denying the intent.
Beautiful.
I don't know if I made any sense, but that's what comes.
I think you made perfect sense. And we're going to see, I think, some of your ideas play out in one of our sources. So I 100% agree with you. And I think that the things you're bringing up, right? How you can sort of be dishonest about your intention, how you can like you're protecting yourself, you can pretend that something meant something different is definitely one of the big dangers of Onat Devarim. And it's why the rabbis took it so seriously. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I think you're totally right. Yeah, Melissa.
I have never thought of it that way, that it's a worse offense, and that's because it's dishonesty on top of what it is, the aggression. But it reminds me of when they say about of all the treif animals, pig is considered the most treif because it's dishonest. It's looking like it's gonna be kosher. It has the split hooves, but inside it's not ruminant. It's not chewing the cud, and that's fooling us. So it's supposed to be in the like a different level of trade.
Interesting. I've
But
never heard
we're
that.
all forbidden. But the representation of trade, I guess, is what I mean to say.
Hmm.
Symbol, and I was taught that it's used as a symbol because it's that dishonesty on top of it.
Hmm.
Excuse me, Rabbanit and Melissa.
Yeah.
Um, what you're saying actually has some halachic ramifications, and in Yiddish it's called a kusher chazorfis, a kosher, a kosher. It has a kosher looking hoof.
Yes.
Hmm. Interesting. Cool. I didn't know that. Thank you both for teaching us that.
I didn't get that, but the
It's
Yiddish expression. I'm so sorry I missed it.
yeah, Rabbi Eliakim, can you say the Yiddish expression one more
Could you
time?
could Rabbi Eliakim repeat that phrase, please? We didn't catch it.
Kusher chazorfisel.
A kosher,
A kusher
yeah.
chazer fisel. A
Right.
kosher chazer foot.
Chazer, pig,
Kosher,
fisel is like a foot.
kosher pig's feet.
Yeah.
A kosher, a chazer thistle.
Yes, exactly. This is good. We should do Yiddish lessons too. Then we'll be really cooking. Um, great. Okay, we're going to circle back to what Tamar was saying. I think it's really important. Just a quick look at sort of the technical halacha here. Um, so the Mishnah Torah lists these mitzvot as numbers 252 and 253, right? Shelo lahonot et hager b'dvarim, right? Not to hurt a convert with words, right? Interestingly, Tamar, right here, a ger by the Rambam definitely means a convert. Shne'emar v'ger lo toneh. And then shelo lahonot et hager b'mekach u'memkar, shne'emar lo tilchatenu. So even though the word is not toneh, right? The rabbis are understanding tilchatzenu to be the other side of the ona'ah coin, right? So there's ona'at varim, that's lo toneh, and ona'at mamon, that is lo tilchatzenu. I think actually let's skip the one about the sleeves right now. But you can see here, right, that this is sort of an echo of part of the Gemara that we looked at, right? V'chein im l'chatzu v'hona'u b'mamon over b'shoshla lavin. If a person oppresses a convert and takes unfair financial aggression, advantage of him, he transgresses three negative prohibitions. Al tonu ish et achiv, right? Don't abuse your colleague or your brother. Lo tonu ish et amito. A man should not take unfair advantage of his brother. Velo tilchatzenu. And I think what's really interesting here is that the convert plays this interesting role of a ger and an ach, right? That the Rambam feels like right, it's about abusing your brother or your colleague, and also about this very specific protection for like this more vulnerable class of the convert, of the ger. Um, the Sefer Chinuch also breaks this out into two mitzvot, just like the Rambam. Here he counts out shenimna'nu shelo lahonot et hager b'mamon. Right, we've been prevented to not oppress the convert regarding money. She'im yelanu imo masa umatan shelo lahonot oto. Right? Because if we have give and take business matters with him, we shouldn't oppress him, as it says in our pasuk lo tachlichtenu, right? So that's number one, the opposite way of the Rambam. The amru b'mechilta, it says in the mechilta, lo tilchatenu b'mamono, right? Don't pressure him in regarding to his money. V'zeh halav nosaf al halav sheyichle lehu im Yisrael kulam. Right, this negative commandment is an addition to the negative commandment in which he included with all of Israel, right? All of you can't have ona'at mamon with anyone, gerim or anyone in Bnei Israel.
Well, the implication is that perhaps some people do not treat converts equally, that they have a different standard of behavior toward the convert
Yes.
than they might have to their brothers, to their country, to people who are Jewish by birth.
Yes.
So that would be an explanation for why they separately tell you about the convert.
Yes. Yes. And I think exactly you're picking up right. It's the same tension in the Rambam here in the Sefer Chinuch. Like, are Gerim part of Bnei Israel or are they not? In some ways, by separating them out, we're doing the very thing that we say we shouldn't do with Ona'at Devarim, right? We want to treat converts just like they're part of Bnei Israel, like everybody else. And at the same time, whether it's acknowledging that Gerim are a protected class because they're more likely to be exploited, or because we're saying, listen, it's just different. If you come from outside the community, you're more likely to do the things that might cause someone to give you ona'at devarim, just because you come from a different place. There does seem to be a tension between wanting to treat the Gerim as part of Bnei Israel and also recognizing that they need their own special mitzvah, right? It's an additional, a lav nosaf, an additional negative commandment. So I think that's totally true. Figuring out where that line is very hard. And for the Sefer Chinuch, he feels like here, right, that it does seem like this is about money, right? Nizharu alav b'dvarim ubemamon, right? So it's both about words and about money. Kol mishpatah b'mitzvah hakodemet lazo. And all of its statutes are in the commandment before this, about lo toneh, right? So um, it's sort of like for the Sefer HaChinuch, it seems to be a little bit of an umbrella. Lo toneh is about financial and verbal exploitation. And it's very important to be careful with the convert here. Um, okay, now again, sort of like a little bit of a jump to the Sefer Chinuch of Parsha Bahar. The Sefer Chinuch is saying this idea of lo toneh, which here applies to everyone. He says, "V'noheget mitzvah zo b'chol makom u'b'chol zman." This is not going to be like a commandment that only the Jews of the Midbar, right, the Dor Midbar, uh, observed. It's not just a mitzvah that takes place in the land of Israel, right? This mitzvah of lo toneh is no matter where you are in time or space. B'zacharim u'v'nekevot. Everyone has to do this thing. Va'afilu bekatanim, even children. Ra'ui lihizaher shelo lahachivan b'dvarim yoter midai. We have to be careful not to pain them with words more than what is necessary, right? Just to watch one's words is sort of how I would think about it. Um, Zulati b'mesh tzrichin harbe kadei sheyichru musar. Unless in regard to when they need a lot so that they will take rebuke, right? Sometimes you have to use a lot of words to make sure your children understand what they've done wrong. Va'afilu b'banav u'b'notav b'nei beito shel adam, even with your own children. V'hamakel b'hem shelo l'ta'aram ba'inyanam, ela yimtza chayim bracha v'chavod. Right? If you are lenient with them, if you don't cause pain in your words, you will find life, blessing, and honor. V'ha'over al zeh, someone who is not careful with their words, v'chiv et chavero b'dvarim, and who pains their friend with words, ba'otan sheperashu chachaminu zichronom livracha, b'bal tshuva b'choleh kiyotze bahen, avar alav zeh. Right, and if you are not kind with your words to someone who's Baal Tshuva or someone who is sick, or those like them, maybe including the ger, has violated this commandment. And then we go into sort of the technicalities of punishment for these commandments. But this is a serious thing, is sort of how I would say the Sefer HaChinuch is treating it, right? It's a very serious command. And the Shulchan Aruch in the Choshen Mishpat explains this. Here it says, right, Asur l'hona'at b'dvarim u'leganov da'at habriot v'leremot b'mekach u'mimkar, and there are 20 si'ufim, and I only brought us a very small portion, right, that just as there is oppression in commercial, kashem she'ona'a b'mekach u'b'mimkar, kach ona'a dvarim, right, again, I think commercial transaction oppression, financial oppression feels more obvious, and so the Shulchan Aruch is saying there is also this verbal oppression, and echoes all of the sources we've seen, right? Ugedola onaat varim onaat mamon. It's much more important to be careful with our words. Shezen nitan lachashbon, lahashivun, v'zel lo nitan lahashibon, right? Because money can be returned, whereas words cannot be returned. Right? You can always say, "Oh, I'm sorry I cheated you. Here's your check back." Maybe that person won't do business with you anymore, but they have their money back. Whereas with words, you cannot return them. Zeh begufo v'zeh b'mamono, right? One has to do with a person's self, like their own body, their integrity, where one is just about their money. V'hatzoek al ona'at dvarim na'aneh miyad. And there's this idea that one who cries out over being verbally oppressed is answered immediately. Like I think we do speak about this here, right? The Rabbeinu Bachya will go into this, that like the gates of prayer, the Sharei Tefillah, are open to those who are crying because of a verbal exploitation or offense. And tzarich lihizaher biyoter ba'onat hager, right? As Tamar was pointing out, we have to be even more careful with oppressing the ger, ben begufo ben bebamono, either kinds of affliction. Lefi shehu zaher alav kama mikomot, because we've said so many times in the Torah, right, that we should not oppress or afflict the stranger. We should be kind to the stranger. And I think it is, as Tamar was saying, that we sometimes are not as careful with the stranger. And so the Shulchan Aruch is saying, be careful. We have to be careful. I left in this last little piece that comes after because I was intrigued. Tzarich lehizaher ba'onat ishto. One also must be careful in oppressing one's wife. Lefi shedimota mitsui, that she has many tears. And I think that in the time of the Shulchan Aruch, one might be able to say women and gerim are sort of in the same class of like disempowered people. And so I found it interesting that they went together. I think if we translate it as one spouse, it's an especially beautiful reminder, right? Just as we might be not careful enough with the convert, we sometimes take those that are closest to us, that we love the most for granted, and we speak to them less kindly than we would speak to like the person checking us out at the grocery store. And so I thought that was a beautiful reminder. Like when thinking about people we forget to be kind to, sometimes it's those people that are most different than us, the ger, and sometimes it is the people that are most similar to us, like our own spouse. I don't know if that was the Shulchan Aruch's intention, but I thought it was very interesting. It made sense to me that way. Um, Okay, to finish, what I want to do is read part of Rabbi Dina Weiss. And I do want to say here for the recording and here for all of you that when I taught the class on gender and modern orthodoxy, someone said to me, a very wise friend said to me, you know, I don't mind so much that I can't read Torah because the shul invests in so many beautiful female scholars in residence. And that doesn't have to be the way you feel. I'm not sure it's the way I feel, that that's like the same, being able to read from the Torah or being able to share Torah. But I thought, my goodness, I almost never cite women on my source sheet, and I should share more words of Torah, right? It's not simple to change the way we observe Kriyat Torah in Shul, but I could certainly add some words of Torah from women. And Rabbi Dina Weiss is a beautiful Torah scholar, and so I brought some of her essay and I hyperlinked it here on the Hadar website. And it's called Just Joking. And so she references Rabbeinu Bachya, and so I brought him here. But maybe in the interest of time, I will leave the text here if you want to go back to it. But we'll just look at it in her words. And I think here is where she mentions some of the things, some of the themes that you were talking about, Tamar. So she says in Rabbeinu Bachya's commentary, he highlights the two dimensions that we've talked about, right? First, how it affects the victims in a uniquely terrible way. And then, in spite of this, how the perpetrator might still be able to interpret his own behavior charitably. The problem with ona'ah of both the financial and the merely verbal type is that in either situation, there is plausible deniability on the part of the person who does it, right? It's exactly what you were saying, Tamar. When the perpetrator asks, who will know if I intended harm? She is reflecting that her behavior is not clearly wrong to an outside viewer. How is another person supposed to know whether I am intentionally giving bad advice? Maybe I don't know what the market value is of the item, and that's why I'm overcharging. Maybe I'm trying to be complimentary, right? Like Nelson was saying, when I refer to the past of the Baal Tshuva, I'm letting everyone know how far this person has come. The act of ona'ah is so subtle and slight that it can go by unnoticed, right? So I think that here Rabbi Weiss is suggesting a sort of purposeful, passive aggressive kind of behavior, but Nelson, I think it would be fair to read it as an honest mistake, right? I'm trying to be complimentary, but it is subtle and slight, and sometimes it causes harm. More significantly, this behavior might even be undetectable to the person who engages in it themselves, right? As I was saying, a person might ask themselves the question of whether or not they intended to hurt their friend and conclude it's not like I meant any harm. We can delude ourselves into thinking that if a comment isn't designed to be hurtful or isn't obviously harmful, then it must be okay. We can cite the no offense defense. If I didn't mean to offend you, then you should not be offended. If I didn't mean anything by my comment, or I meant it to be funny, especially if I meant it to be kind and helpful, then I'm not responsible for the effect that my words had. However, the laws of ona'ah and ona'at tevarim focus on the outcome for the victim. If they were cheated or they were hurt, then the person who caused them that pain is responsible. The absence of malintent does not absolve us when we cause harm. I think that's a very important reminder because it is such like a fuzzy idea, right? and it hits people in such different ways. This understanding of the mindset of the perpetrator of ona'ah is highlighted in Rabbeinu Bachya's first insight into why ona'at devarim is so bad. It can have a uniquely harmful psychological effect on its target. Because the perpetrator can plausibly deny that they have done anything wrong, the victim might be led to blame themselves for feeling hurt or disenfranchised, right? Like, oh, Gerim are so sensitive. We can never say anything in front of the ger at our table, right? And then they think, well, maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe that's just the way the Jewish community is, right? A person might even second guess themselves. Maybe I deserve this bad price because I'm not a savvy shopper. Or maybe I don't deserve to grow in learning. I came from a non-Jewish background. A person might deny their own legitimate feelings and criticize themselves for being oversensitive. This possibility is reinforced by the way Rabbeinu Bachya characterizes the bad feelings of someone who suffers on account of ona'ah. His heart is subsumed by his sorrow. It can be more literally translated as his heart is submissive on account of his sorrow, meaning that he subjects himself to the ona'ah narrative and submits to its power to corrode his own sense of self and dignity. It's a heavy note to end on, and you're welcome to look through the mitzvah count at your own pace. But there are 53 mitzvot. It is, I think, one of the top two, the top two parshiot with the most mitzvot in it. But I think that when I was looking through the list and trying to decide, there are so many interesting ones, so many contemporary ones. And I think that I was drawn, I shared at the beginning, I was drawn to the ger because I'm interested in the halachot around gerut, but also because it feels to me to be like one of these really big ones. And maybe, right, Nelson, that's like what you were saying also about the treat one like you want to be treated, right? That if that's like the golden rule, it's like all of the other mitzvot can be subsumed under it, right? All of the mitzvot of gerut, of how you treat a ger, how many times you turn him away, what a hard time you give them about the mikvah, whatever the things are, what you make them learn, all the hoops you make them jump through, all of that can be sort of subsumed under this mitzvah of onat varim, especially the lo toneh to the ger. And so I think it's a really powerful mitzvah, and it's one in which we have to be really careful about the way we speak and the way we talk to each other. And so I think it's a very beautiful mitzvah tucked into this long list of many mitzvot here. But I will stop talking and I will stop sharing so we can all see each other. And I welcome more comments and ideas.
Well, the rest is commentary.
Exactly.
I always feel so proud when I hear again the very, very high standards the Torah has for ethical behavior. It makes me proud that this is my tradition.
Amen. And I think I love it, especially because it's easy to get lost in some of the weirder mitzvot of this parsha, and to sort of miss it, right? And to acknowledge that, I think is very powerful, right? We have a strong and beautiful ethical tradition. Thank you for bringing that up, Tamar.
Couple
Yeah.
quick things.
Oh,
Couple quick things.
sure.
Somebody else wanted to say something first?
You go first.
Couple
Melissa
quick
will go
things.
after.
Couple quick things. The Baba Rebbe, before my time, there was a convert in his congregation, and he stayed extra long at the convert's kid's Pidyon Ben. And somebody asked him, why did the Rebbe stay so long? You never stay by so long. And he said, how many times in life do we have a chance to be Mekayim the mitzvah of V'ahavta et Hager? That's one. Two, I remember I went to a Vort, a couple got engaged of Gerim. And then, but we sometimes have to be, I guess, careful, and I'm sure I'm not careful enough when they're on the other hand, they might be lacking some humility. Two quick points, and I see sometimes then I apologize afterwards because I went a little too far. One of them sends out these posts on Facebook all the time. How if you are a good Jew, you have to wear a black hat and a black kippah and a black suit and a white shirt because that's what a Jew has to do. And what's even worse is another guy here in the community, sweet guy, who before Yom Ha'atzmaut puts out a post every year. No one is allowed to celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut. It's against Torah law. And I wrote back like, come on, give me a break. Um, and then finally, Baba Rebbe also, there was a boy, I don't think he was a ger, but I remember somebody asked me to take him under my wings at one point. He grew up, the Baba Rebbe got him a shidduch, got him married, and made a wedding for over 1,000 people. He walked him to the chuppah. The Rebbitzin walked the Kala to the chuppah, and it was as if it was his own child. As they said, the Hadrat Panim, the glow on the Rebbe's face, and I was there. I made the effort to go to that to that wedding, was as if it was his own kid, because it was similar to being a ger. It was about Shiva, didn't have any family, and I guess that's what we have to be mindful of. Yeshikochech, thank you.
Thank you. I think I love the stories about the Baba Ver because I think there are many rabbis who do a beautiful job of really demonstrating how important these mitzvot are, especially around gay roots. And we should learn from them and be intentional about them. And I think what you said about the Facebook post is important. I think lo Toneh, why do we oppress someone verbally? Sometimes it's because we're mean-spirited or we think we're being nice, but we're not. And sometimes it's just hard to watch someone else be lo Toneh or Toneh, right? To have onat devarim and not sort of rise to that feeling, right? And it happens to so many of us. And so much of onat devarim, I think, comes from either insecurities or sort of this like gut defensiveness, right? Like, of course, we should celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut. Such a beautiful, right? At Skokie Valley, we say a bracha on Hallel on Yom Ha'atzmaut. And so it's hard to watch someone denigrate something you care about. It's one of those like vicious cycle mitzvot, right? And so I think stopping that cycle is very important, but it is a great point. Um, Melissa, sorry, I didn't mean to
Oh,
cut you off.
I put my hand up because I was actually trying to catch somebody else's attention.
Oh,
But earlier I did have my hand up from
yeah.
you. I wanted to thank you for listing out those 53. It's really helpful to see it laid out like that. I'm wondering if I could get a copy.
Oh, of course. Well, I'm happy to share the link.
Email?
I think, did Karen send it out? The link on the,
Oh, maybe she did. Maybe that's already in my email. I'll check.
it's totally fine. I'll see if I can. That was my Google Doc, which I'm happy to share with you, but I think that Karen does a very lovely job of putting it on the
The
website.
It's probably there, and I was just reading so fast I didn't even see that line.
But
Are
I
you
don't
talking
always give
about
it
the
to her
source
early.
sheet?
Yeah, here it is. I'm gonna share it in the
Oh, that's
um,
okay. I'll find it in my email, but thank you.
um yeah, so many of the Parshiot that we've covered so far in Sefer Breshit had literally zero, right? And now such a wealth in one Parsha. So that's beautiful. I will try to continue to list them out. And I do think there's probably like a whole college level class to give on the difference between the Sefer HaChinuch's list and the Rambam's list and all these different things that I'm not totally holding in to be totally transparent. But I listed them both just so that if you want to look at the differences, you can.
It would be an interesting class someday. Interesting that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Probably in the Beit Midrash, they study that, right? The differences between how it's laid out.
Yeah, I think that I mean, some of them are bigger deals than other ones. Right? So, like certain mitzvot about the land of Israel, that kind of thing. Some of them might just be a stylistic thing. I'm not entirely sure how it irons out, right? But of course, it's not clear, right? It's not clear how many mitzvot are in this parsha, right? Is lo Toneh and lo tatzlichanu different? Are they the same? And so I think figuring out how to get to 613 is really the challenge, and there are a few different ways to approach that.
Thank you so much for this class.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming. Again, I apologize for last week's miscommunication. I look forward to seeing you this coming week, and I hope everyone enjoys the warm weather, the balmy 35 degrees that it might be outside and the sun. And I look forward to seeing you next week. An early Shabbat Shalom.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.